Inner Lion Media.
When heaven meets earth, when people strive for greater understanding, when myth and legend are understood to be real and life-changing, when people become materially exhausted, unrequited, hopeless and isolated within themselves, at that darkest hour blossoms the flower of innate spirituality. As we ride in this soul car of the material body, it is to be understood that we are so much more than this clockwork combination of earth, water, fire, air, and ether in which we travel through time and space. While admittedly an exquisite machine, the material body is limited by the ever-present, seemingly unconquerable scourges of birth, death, disease, and old age upon the wandering, hungry soul. When one truly understands that they are not this body, but instead reside temporarily within its manifest combination of elements, only to expand their evolutionary jurisdiction and intimate understanding, then blossoms the flower of innate spirituality. When knowledge arises that mortal man is in fact an eternal spiritual qualitative spark of the unlimited divine fire of God, and that there is from the very first moment of time struck a long and loving relationship between the Creator and the created, then surely blossoms the flower of innate spirituality. Here is the opportunity, and now is the hour, to dive deeper than we have ever done into the wondrous realm of the ever-expanding field of divine consciousness. A singular chance to understand and embrace our real birthright of Sat, Chit, Ananda, or eternity, knowledge, and bliss ever-increasing and everlasting. It has long been said that sound vibration is a bridge between heaven and earth, and to marry that power to the wisdom of the ages is perhaps the strongest connection made between mortal man and the gods above us. Welcome, then, brothers and sisters, to a unique collection of ancient but also inspired contemporary thought on the true nature of our existence here within this wondrous material realm and beyond. This is your ticket to transcendence, a singular opportunity to fly free, soaring to places unknown but deeply felt, a means of intimate connection and liberating power. This is the Yoga Secrets Series. want to gain real control over your destiny, you must understand reincarnation and how it works. It's that simple. No one wants to die. Most of us would like to live forever in full vigor, without wrinkles, gray hair, or arthritis. This is natural, because the first and most basic principle of life is to enjoy. If only we could enjoy life forever. Man's eternal quest for immortality is so fundamental that we find it nearly impossible to conceive of dying. Pulitzer Prize winner William Saroyan, author of The Human Comedy, echoed the views of most people when, in the days just prior to death, he announced to the media, "Everyone has got to die, but I have always believed an exception might be made in my case. Now what?" Most of us seldom, if ever, think about death or what happens afterwards. Some say that death is the end of everything. Some believe in heaven and hell. Still others hold that this life is only one of many we have lived and will live in the future. It is a fact that more than 1/3 of the world's population, over 1.5 billion people, accept reincarnation as an irrevocable fact of life. Reincarnation is not a belief system or a psychological device for escaping the grim finality of death, but rather a precise science that explains our past and future lives. Many books have been written on the subject, usually based upon hypnotic regression, near-death experiences, or accounts of out-of-body experiences. But most reincarnation literature is poorly informed, highly speculative, superficial, and indeed inconclusive. Some books purport to document cases of people who, under hypnosis, have been regressed to previous lifetimes. They describe in detail houses they lived in, streets they walked upon, parks they frequented as children, and the names of their former parents, friends, and relatives. All of this makes for interesting reading. And while such books have certainly stimulated the ever-widening public interest and belief in reincarnation, careful investigations have revealed that many of these so-called past life regression cases are rife with guesswork, inaccuracies, and even fraud. But most importantly, none of these popular works explain the fundamental facts about reincarnation, like the simple process by which the soul eternally transmigrates from one material body to another. In rare instances, when basic principles are discussed, authors generally present their own theories about how and in which particular cases reincarnation occurs, as if some special or gifted living beings reincarnate and others do not. This type of presentation does not deal with the science of reincarnation, but rather introduces instead a confusing array of fabrications and contradictions, leaving the reader with scores of unanswered questions. Does one reincarnate instantaneously or slowly over a long period of time? Can other living beings, like animals, reincarnate into human bodies? Or can a man appear as an animal? If so, how and why? Do we reincarnate forever, or does it end somewhere? Can the soul suffer perpetually in hell or enjoy forever in heaven? Can we control our future incarnations? Can we be reborn on other planets or in other universes? Do good and evil actions play a role in determining our next body? What is the relationship between karma and reincarnation? This audiobook answers these questions, because it scientifically explains the true nature of reincarnation. Finally, this work provides the listener with practical instructions on how to come to grips with and rise above the mysterious and generally misunderstood phenomena of reincarnation, a reality that plays a vital role in shaping man's destiny. We are not these bodies. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. O descendant of Bharat, he who dwells in the body is eternal and can never be slain. Therefore you need not grieve for any creature. Bhagavad Gita 2:30. The very first step in self-realization is realizing one's identity as separate from the body. I am not this body. I am spirit soul is an essential realization for anyone who wants to transcend death and enter into the spiritual world beyond. It is not simply a matter of saying, I am not this body, but actually realizing it. This is not as simple as it may seem at first. Although we are not these bodies, but are pure consciousness, somehow or other, we have become encased with the bodily dress. If we actually want the happiness and independence that transcends death, we have to establish ourselves and remain in our constitutional position as pure consciousness. Living in the bodily conception, our idea of happiness is like that of a man in delirium. Some philosophers claim that this delirious condition of bodily identification should be cured by abstaining from any action. Because these material activities have been a source of distress for us, they claim that we should actually stop all activity. Their culmination of perfection is a kind of Buddhist nirvana, in which no activities are performed at all. Buddha maintained that somehow or other, if these material elements are separated or dismantled, the cause of suffering is removed. If the tax collector gives us too much difficulty because we happen to possess a large house, one simple solution is to destroy the house. Beyond this combination of material elements, there is a spirit, and the symptom of that spirit is consciousness. Consciousness cannot be denied. A body without consciousness is a dead body. As soon as consciousness is removed from the body, the mouth will not speak, the eye will not see, nor will the ears hear. A child can understand that. It is a fact that consciousness is absolutely necessary for the animation of the body. Just as heat or smoke are symptoms of fire, so consciousness is the symptom of the soul. The energy of the soul or self is produced in the shape of consciousness. Indeed, consciousness proves that the soul is present. This is not only the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita, but the conclusion of all Vedic literature. We are not these bodies. The impersonalist school of Sankaracharya, as well as the Vaishnavas following in the disciplic succession from Lord Krishna, acknowledge the factual existence of the soul, but the Buddhist philosophers do not. The Buddhists contend at a certain stage the combination of matter produces consciousness. But this argument is refuted by the fact that although we have all the constituents of matter at our disposal, we cannot produce consciousness from them. All of the material elements are present in a dead man, but we cannot revive this man to consciousness. This body is not like a machine. When a part of the body breaks down, it can be replaced, and the machine will work again. But when the body breaks down and consciousness leaves the body, there is no possibility of our replacing the broken part and rejuvenating the body's consciousness. The soul is different from the body, and as long as the soul is there, the body is animate. But there is no possibility of making the body animate in the absence of the soul. Because we cannot perceive the soul by our gross senses, we deny it. Actually, there are so many things that are there that we cannot see. We cannot see air, radio waves, or sound, nor can we perceive minute bacteria with our blunt senses. But this does not mean that they are not there. By the aid of the microscope and other instruments, many things can be perceived which had previously been denied by the imperfect senses. Just because the soul, which is atomic in size, has not yet been perceived by senses or instruments, we should not conclude that it is not there. It can, however, be perceived by its symptoms and effects. In the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna points out that all of our miseries are due to false identification with the body. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of heat and cold, happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O scion of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Bhagavad Gita 2:14. In the summertime, we may feel pleasure from contact with water, but in the winter, we may shun that very water because it is too cold. In either case, the water is the same, but we perceive it as pleasant or indeed painful due to its contact with the body. All feelings of distress and happiness are due to the body. Under certain conditions, the body and mind feel happiness and distress. Factually, we are hankering after happiness, for the soul's constitutional position is that of happiness. The soul is part and parcel of the Supreme Being, who is the embodiment of knowledge, bliss, and eternity. Indeed, the very name Krishna, which is non-sectarian, means the greatest pleasure. Krishna is the epitome of pleasure, and being part and parcel of him, we hanker for pleasure. A drop of ocean water has all the properties of the ocean itself, and we, though minute particles of the Supreme Whole, have the same energetic properties of the Supreme. The atomic soul, although so small, is moving the entire body to act in many wonderful ways. In the world we see so many cities, highways, bridges, great buildings, monuments, and civilization. But who has done all this? It is all done by the minute spiritual spark within the body. If such wonderful things can be performed by the minute spiritual spark, we cannot begin to imagine what can be accomplished by the supreme spiritual whole. The natural hankering of the minute spiritual spark is for the qualities of the whole, knowledge, bliss, and eternity. But these hankerings are being frustrated due to the material body. The information on how to attain the soul's desire is given within the Bhagavad Gita. At present, we are trying to attain eternity, bliss, and knowledge by means of an imperfect instrument. Actually, our progress towards these goals is being blocked by the material body. Therefore, we have to come to the realization of our existence beyond the body. Theoretical knowledge that we are not these bodies will not do. We have to keep ourselves always separate as masters of the body, not as servants. If we know how to drive a car well, it will give us good service. But if we do not know how, we will be in danger. The body is composed of the senses, and the senses are always hungry after their objects. The eyes see a beautiful person and tell us, "Oh, there is a beautiful girl, a beautiful boy, let's go see." The ears are telling us, "Oh, that's very nice music, let us go hear it." The tongue is saying, "Oh, there is a very nice restaurant with palatable dishes, let us go." In this way, the senses are dragging us from one place to another, and because of this, we are perplexed. As a boat in the water is swept away by a strong wind, even one of the senses which the mind focuses on can carry away a man's intelligence. Bhagavad Gita 2:6-7. It is imperative that we learn how to control the senses. The name Goswami is given to someone who has learned to master the senses. Go means senses, and Swami means controller of. So one who can control the senses is to be considered a Goswami. Krishna indicates that one who identifies with the illusory material body cannot establish himself in his proper identity as spirit soul. Bodily pleasures are flickering and intoxicating, and we cannot actually enjoy it because of its momentary nature. Actual pleasure is of the soul, not the body. We have to mold ourselves in such a way that we will not be diverted by bodily pleasure. If somehow we are diverted, it is not possible for us to establish our consciousness in its true identity beyond the body. In the minds of those who are too addicted to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. The Vedas deal with the subject of the three modes of material nature. Rise above these modes, O Arjuna. Be transcendental to all of them. Be free from all dualities and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established firmly within the self. Bhagavad Gita 2:4-4 and 4:5. The word Veda means book of knowledge. There are many books of knowledge which vary according to the country, population, environment, etc. In India, the books of knowledge are referred to as the Vedas. In the West, they are called the Old and New Testament. The Mohammedans accept the Quran. But what is the purpose for all of these books of knowledge? They are to train us to understand our position as pure soul. Their purpose is to restrict bodily activities by certain rules and regulations. And these rules and regulations are known as codes of morality. The Bible, for instance, has 10 commandments intended to regulate our lives. The body must be controlled in order for us to reach the highest perfection. And without regulative principles, it is not possible to perfect our lives. The regulated principles may differ from country to country or from scripture to scripture, but that doesn't matter, for they are made according to the time and circumstance and mentality of the people. But the principle of regulated control is the same. Similarly, the government sets down certain regulations to be obeyed by its citizens. There is no possibility of making advancement in government or civilization without some regulations. Sri Krishna tells Arjuna the regulative principles of the Vedas are meant to control the three modes of material nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance. However, Krishna is advising Arjuna to establish himself in his pure constitutional position as spirit soul, beyond the dualities of material nature. As we have already pointed out, these dualities, such as heat and cold, pleasure and pain, arise due to contact of the senses with their objects. In other words, they are born of identification with the body. Krishna indicates that those who are devoted to enjoyment and power are carried away by the words of the Vedas which promise pain or heavenly enjoyment by sacrifice and regulated activity. Enjoyment is our birthright, for it is the characteristic of the spirit soul. But the spirit soul tries to enjoy materially, and that is a mistake. Everyone is turning to material subjects for enjoyment, and is compiling as much knowledge as possible. Someone is becoming a chemist, politician, artist, or whatever. Everyone knows something of everything, and everything of something, and that is generally known as knowledge. But as soon as we leave the body, all of this knowledge is vanquished. In a previous life, one may be a great man of knowledge, but in this life, he must start again by going to school and learning how to read from the very beginning. Whatever knowledge was acquired in the previous life is now forgotten. The situation is that we are actually seeking eternal knowledge, but this cannot be acquired by this material body. We are all seeking enjoyment through these material bodies. But bodily enjoyment is not actual enjoyment. It is artificial. We have to understand that if we want to continue in this artificial enjoyment, we will not be able to attain our position of eternal enjoyment. The body must be considered a diseased condition. A diseased man cannot enjoy himself properly. A man with jaundice, say, will taste sugar candy as bitter, but a healthy man can taste its sweetness. In either case, the sugar candy is the same, but according to our condition, it tastes different. Unless we are cured of this diseased conception of bodily life, we cannot taste the sweetness of spiritual life. Indeed, it will taste bitter to us. At the same time, by increasing our enjoyment of material life, we are further complicating our diseased condition. A typhoid patient cannot eat solid food, and if someone gives it to him to enjoy and he eats it, he is further complicating his malady and endangering his life. If we really want freedom from the miseries of material existence and the body, we must minimize our demands and pleasures. Actually, material enjoyment is not enjoyment at all. Real enjoyment does not cease. Bhagavan Sri Krishna is the real enjoyer, and the Bhagavad Gita confirms this. The sages, knowing me as the ultimate enjoyer of all sacrifices and austerities, the Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attain peace from the pangs of material misery. Bhagavad Gita 5:2-9. Our enjoyment comes from understanding our position as the enjoyed. The real enjoyer is the Supreme Lord, and we are enjoyed by Him. Although Krishna is the enjoyer, and we, the enjoyed, the enjoyment can be participated in equally by everyone. Our enjoyment can be perfected when we participate in the enjoyment of God. There is no possibility in our enjoying separately on the bodily platform. Material enjoyment on the gross bodily platform is discouraged throughout the Bhagavad Gita. O son of Kunti, non-permanent appearance of heat and cold, happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise only from sense perception, O scion of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Bhagavad Gita 2:14. The gross material body is a result of the interaction of the modes of material nature, and it is doomed to destruction. Only the material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is subject to destruction. Therefore fight, O descendant of Bharata. Bhagavad Gita 2:18. Krishna therefore encourages us to transcend the bodily conception of life and attain our actual spiritual life. When the embodied being is able to transcend these three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, he can become free from birth, death, disease, and old age, and their distresses, and can enjoy the nectar even in this life. Bhagavad Gita 14:20. To establish ourselves on the pure Brahma-Bhuta spiritual platform, above the three modes of material nature, we must take up this method of Krishna consciousness. The gift of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the chanting of the names of Krishna, and it is employed by the highest transcendentalists. It is how the transcendentalists realize their identity beyond birth and death, beyond the material body, and transfer themselves from the material universe to the spiritual universes. This method is called Bhakti Yoga or Mantra Yoga. Historical figures on reincarnation. As far back as I can remember, I have unconsciously referred to the experiences of a previous state of existence. Henry David Thoreau. All human beings go through a previous life. Who knows how many fleshy forms the air of heaven occupies, before he can be brought to understand the value of that silence and solitude whose starry plains are but the vestibule of spiritual worlds. Balzac. As we live through thousands of dreams in our present life, so is our present life only one of many thousands of such lives which we enter from the other, more real life, and then return after death. Our life is but one of the dreams of the more real life. And so it is endlessly, until the very last one, the very real life, the life of God. Leo Tolstoy. I am confident that there truly exists such a thing as living again, and that the living spring from the dead. Socrates. When the physical organism breaks up, the soul survives. It then takes on another body, degrading or elevating according to merit or demerit. Paul Gauguin. I adopted the theory of reincarnation when I was 26. Genius is experience. Some seem to think that it is a gift or talent, but it is the fruit of long experience in many lives. Henry Ford. The doctrine of transmigration was a means of constructing a plausible vindication of the ways of the cosmos to man, and warned that none but very hasty thinkers will reject it on the grounds of inherent absurdity. British biologist Thomas Huxley. I hold that when a person dies, his soul returns again to earth, arrayed in some new flesh disguise. Another mother gives birth, with sturdier limbs and brighter brain. The old soul takes to the road again. British Poet Laureate John Masefield. The soul comes from without into the human body, as into a temporary abode, and it goes out anew. It passes into other habitations, for the soul is immortal. Ralph Waldo Emerson. To experience the sanskars cultivated in the human form of life, the soul must reincarnate again and again in that human form. The innumerable human forms through which the soul has to pass are determined by the law of karma, or the nature of its previous samskars, whether of virtue, vice, happiness, or misery. During these lives, the soul, which is eternal, identifies itself with the gross body, which is destructible. While developing full consciousness of the gross world, the soul simultaneously develops subtle and mental bodies. But as long as its consciousness is confined to the gross world alone, it cannot use these bodies consciously in wakefulness. It becomes conscious of these bodies and the corresponding worlds only when its full consciousness turns inward, that is, towards itself. When the soul is conscious of the subtle world through the subtle body, it identifies with the subtle body, just as it identifies with the gross body when it is conscious of the gross world through the gross body. The homeward journey of the soul consists in freeing itself from the illusion of being identical with its bodies, gross, subtle, and mental. When the attention of the soul turns towards self-knowledge and self-realization, there is a gradual loosening and disappearance of the samskars that keep consciousness turned towards the phenomenal world. Disappearance of the samskars proceeds side by side with piercing through the veil of cosmic illusion, and the soul not only begins to transcend the different states of the phenomenal world, but also to know itself as different bodies. The spiritual path begins when the soul tries to find itself and turns its full consciousness towards the truth or God. Meher Baba. I did not begin when I was born, nor when I was conceived. I have been growing, developing, through incalculable myriads of millenniums. All of my previous selves have their voices, echoes, promptings within me. Oh, incalculable times again shall I be born, and yet the stupid dolts about me think that by stretching my neck with a rope, they will make me cease. Jack London, The Star Rover. Has it occurred to you that transmigration is at once an explanation and a justification for the evil of the world? If the evils we suffer are the result of sins committed in our past lives, we can bear them with resignation and hope. That if in this one we strive towards virtue, our future lives will be less afflicted. Somerset Maugham. There is no death. How can there be death if everything is part of the Godhead? The soul never dies, and the body is never really alive. Isaac Singer. He saw all these forms and faces in 1,000 relationships to each other become newly born. Each one was mortal, a passionate, painful example of all that is transitory. Yet none of them died. They only changed, were always reborn, continually had a new face. Only time stood between one face and another. Hermann Hesse, Siddhartha. Finding myself existing in the world, I believe I shall, in some shape or another, always exist. Benjamin Franklin. I died as a mineral and became a plant. I died as a plant and rose to animal. I died as an animal and I was a man. Why should I fear? When was I less by dying? Rumi. Souls are hurled down to the regions of total darkness. They are then released from prison, permitted to ascend to earth and migrate into all sorts of animals, reptiles, birds, plants, and people. Souls are hurled down to the regions of total darkness. There they are released from prison, permitted to ascend to earth to migrate into all sorts of animals, reptiles, birds, beasts, and men, according to their rank and character, even into vegetables and minerals, there to serve on probation. If they pass without reproach their several graduations, they are permitted to become cows and men. If as men they behave well, they are restored to their original rank and bliss in heaven. President John Adams. I know I am deathless. We have thus far exhausted trillions of winters and summers, and there are trillions ahead and trillions even ahead of them. Walt Whitman, Song of Myself. We all have some experience of a feeling that comes over us occasionally, of what we are saying and doing having been done and said in a remote time, of our having been surrounded dim ages ago by the same faces, objects, and circumstances. Charles Dickens, David Copperfield. May earth restore to us our breath of life. May goddess heaven and the airy space return it. May Soma give us once again a body, and Pushan show us again the way of salvation. Umochana Pramochana. Some people believe we go on living into another body after death, that we lived before. They call it reincarnation, that we all lived on Earth before, thousands of years ago, or even on some other planet. They say we have forgotten it. I could well imagine I might have lived in former centuries, and there encountered questions I was not yet able to answer, that I had to be born again, because I had not fulfilled the task before me. Carl Jung. Let us face it boldly. Deep down, nobody in his right mind can visualize his own existence without assuming he has always lived and will always live thereafter. Erik Erikson. Understanding the law of karma and reincarnation is displayed in numerous biblical passages. Whoso shreddeth man's blood by man, shall his blood be shed. If every murderer must himself be killed by man, the reactive process obviously requires in many cases more than one lifetime. The contemporary police are just not quick enough. The early Christian church accepted the doctrine of reincarnation, which was expounded by the Gnostics and numerous church fathers, including Clement of Alexandria in the 3rd century and Saint Jerome in the 5th. The doctrine was first declared heresy in AD 553 by the Second Council of Constantinople. At that time, many Christians thought the doctrine of reincarnation afforded man too ample a stage of time and space to encourage him to strive for immediate salvation. But truths suppressed lead disconcertingly to a host of errors. The millions have not utilized yet their one lifetime to seek God, but to enjoy this world, so uniquely one, and so shortly to be forever lost. The truth is that man reincarnates on earth until he has consciously regained his status as a true son of God. Paramahansa Yogananda. I cannot consider permanent enmity between man, and believing as I do in the theory of rebirth, I live in the hope that if not in this birth, but in some other I shall be able to hug all of humanity in friendly embrace. Mahatma Gandhi. It's so silly. All you have to do is get the heck out of your body when you die. My gosh, everybody's done it thousands of times. Just because they don't remember it doesn't mean they haven't done it. J.D. Solinger. Friends are all souls we have known in other lives. We are drawn to each other. That's how I feel. Even if I have only known them a day, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to wait until I have known them 2 years, because we must have met somewhere before, you know. George Harrison. There is life after death, and there is also the chance to free oneself from the cycle of samsara, or the repeated wheel of birth and death, and attain a life of immortality. But because we have been accustomed to accepting one body after another since time immemorial, it is difficult to think of eternal life. Material existence is so troublesome that one may think that if indeed there is an eternal life, that life too must also be so. For example, a diseased man who is taking very bitter medicine and lying in bed passing stool and urine, unable to move, may find his life so intolerable he thinks, "Let me commit suicide." Similarly, materialistic life is so miserable that in desperation one sometimes takes to a philosophy of voidism or impersonalism, try to negate his very existence and make everything zero. Actually, however, becoming zero is not possible nor necessary. We are in trouble in our material condition, but when we get out of our material condition, we will find real life, eternal life. Queen Kunti Devi. As we sleep, when rest has been taken by the voluntary nerves, man requires no help to awaken naturally. So after death, when man has enjoyed a full rest, he awakens naturally to life in a new body upon the earth. Swami Sri Yukteswar Giri. As one grows older, the distinction between the conscious self and the physical body becomes more obvious. Within one lifetime, a person can observe his body is constantly changing. It does not endure, and time proves the child ephemeral. The body comes into existence at a certain time, grows, matures, produces byproducts of children, and gradually dwindles and dies. The physical body is thus unreal, for it will, in due course, most assuredly disappear. Mukunda Das Goswami. I have been born more times than anyone except Krishna. Mark Twain. What pious ears could bear to hear that after a life spent in so many and severe distresses, if indeed that should be called a life at all, which is rather more a death, so utter that the love of this present death, which makes us fear that death which deliver us from it, and after evils so disastrous, and miseries of all kinds have at length been expiated and finished by the help of true religion and wisdom, and when we have thus attained to the vision of God, and have entered into bliss by the contemplation of spiritual light and participation in his unchangeable immortality, which we burn to attain, that we must at some time lose all this, and that they who do lose it are cast down from that eternity, truth, and felicity to infernal mortality and shameful foolishness, and are involved in accursed woes, in which God is lost, truth held in disdain, and happiness sought in impurities. and that this will happen endlessly again and again, recurring at fixed intervals, and in regularly returning periods. Who, I say, can ever listen to such ideas? Who can accept or suffer them to even be spoken? Were they true, it were not only more prudent to keep silence regarding them, but even, to express myself as best I can, it were the part of wisdom not to know them at all. St. Augustine's The City of God. Quotations on Reincarnation. Meher Baba. The worldly man completely identifies life with the manifestations and activities of the gross body. For him, therefore, the beginning and the end of bodily existence are also the beginning and the end of the individual soul. The overwhelming importance of death is derived from man's attachment to particular forms. But death loses much of its sting and importance, even for the worldly man, if he takes a broader view of the course of life. In spite of their transitoriness, there is an unbroken continuity of life through these forms, old ones being discarded, and new ones created for habitation and expression. The recurring incident of death is matched only by the recurring incident of birth. Old generations are replaced by new ones. Life is reborn in new forms, incessantly renewing and refreshing itself. Immortality of the individualized soul is rendered possible by the fact that the individualized soul is not the same as the physical body. The individualized soul continues to exist with all its sanskars or impressions in the inner worlds through the medium of its mental and subtle bodies. So even after it has discarded its gross body at the time of death, so life, through the medium of the gross body, is only a section of the continuous life of the individualized soul. The other sections of its life have their expression in other worlds. The whole of nature may therefore be conveniently divided into three parts: the gross world, the subtle world, and the mental world. When the individualized soul has reincarnated itself in a physical body, it expresses its life in the gross world. When it drops its outer sheath, the physical body continues to have expression of life either in the subtle world through the subtle body, or in the mental world through the mental body. Ordinarily, life in the physical body is terminated only when the samskars released for expression in that incarnation have all been worked out. When the soul drops its physical body with the gross world through the ego and the mind, though the ego and the mind are retained with all the impressions accumulated in one's earthly career, ordinary spirits try to reconcile themselves to severance from the gross world, and conform to the limitations of changed conditions, and sink into a state of subjectivity in which a new process begins of mentally reviving the experiences of the earthly career by reviving the samskars connected with them. Thus, death inaugurates a period of comparative rest, consisting in a temporary withdrawal from the gross sphere of action. It is the beginning of an interval between the last incarnation and the next. In the successive incarnations of an individual soul, there is not only a thread of continuity and identity, but here is also an uninterrupted reign of the law of cause and effect through the persistence and operation of karma. The successive incarnations, with all of their particulars, are closely and unfailingly determined by rational law. The actions of past lives determine the conditions and circumstances of the present life, and the actions of the present life have their share in determining the conditions and circumstances of our future lives. Part 2. Quotations on Reincarnation from His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Maya's illusion is like the foam, which mixes again with the sea. No one is mother, father, or relative, like the sea foam. They remain a short while only, and as the sea foam merges into the sea, this precious body of 5 elements disappears. Who can say how many forms the embodied soul has taken? Bengali poem. When we die, this material body composed of 5 elements, earth, water, air, fire, and ether, decomposes, and the gross materials return to the elements, or as the Bible says, "Dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return." In some societies the body is burned, in others it is buried, and others thrown to the animals. In India the Hindus burn the body, and thus it is transformed into ashes. Ash is simply another form of earth. Christians bury the body, and after some time in the grave the body eventually turns to dust, which again, like ash, is another form of earth. There are other societies like the Parsi community in India that neither burn nor bury the body, but rather throw it to the vultures, who immediately come to eat the body, which is eventually transformed into stool. So in any case, this beautiful body which we are soaping and caring for so nicely year after year will eventually turn into either stool, ashes, or dust. At death, the finer elements, mind, intelligence, and ego, carry the small particle of spiritual soul to another body to suffer or enjoy, according to one's work. It is not the person who has died, but the body. According to Vedic knowledge, the body is always dead. For example, a microphone is made of metal. When electric energy passes through the microphone, it responds by converting sound into electrical impulses, which are amplified and broadcast over loudspeakers. But when there is no electricity in the system, nothing happens. Whether the microphone is working or not, it remains nothing more than an assembly of metal, plastic, etc. Similarly, the human body works because of the living force within it. When this living force leaves the body, it is said that the body is dead, but actually, it is always dead. The life force is the important element.
Its presence alone makes the body appear to be alive. But alive or dead, the physical body is nothing more than a collection of dead matter. The dead body is not the real subject for philosophical inquiry. Rather, we should concern ourselves with the active principle, the principle which makes the body move, the soul. For instance, now I have this 78-year-old Indian body, and I have the false ego that thinks, I am Indian, I am this body. This is a misconception. Someday this temporary body will vanish and I'll get another temporary body. It's just a temporary illusion. The reality is that the soul, based on its desires and activities, transmigrates from one body to another. Pure consciousness, the soul, does not need a material body. For instance, when you dream, you forget your present body, but you still remain conscious. The soul, the consciousness, is like water. Water is pure, but as soon as it falls from the sky and touches the ground, it becomes muddy. How can he not experience it? He knows that he is the active principle. Everyone ultimately knows that they are not the body. Even a child knows it. We can observe this by examining the way we speak. We say, "This is my finger." We never say, "I finger." So what is this I? This is self-realization. I am not this body. And this realization can be extended to other living beings. Why does man kill animals? Why give trouble to others? One who is self-realized can see, here is another self. He simply has a different body. But the same active principle that exists within my body is operating within his body. A self-realized person sees all living entities with equal vision, knowing that the active principle, the self, is present not only in human beings, but within the bodies of animals, birds, fish, insects, trees, and plants. It is not difficult. You can experience this. It is only because of foolishness that people think differently, but everyone knows, I am not this body. This is very easy to experience. I am existing. I understand that I existed in a baby's body. I have existed in a child's body, and also in a boy's body. I have existed in so many bodies, and now I am an old man. Or, for example, say you have put on a black coat. The next moment you put on a white coat. But you are not that black or white coat. You simply changed the coats. If I call you Mr. Blackcoat, that is my foolishness. Similarly, in my lifetime I have changed bodies many times, but I am not any of these bodies. That is real knowledge. The term reincarnation means that I am a spirit soul who has entered a temporary material body. But in my next life I can enter another body. It may well be a dog's body, or a cat's body, or maybe even a king's body. But there will be suffering. Either in the king's body or in the dog's body. These sufferings include birth, death, disease, and old age. So in order to abolish these 4 kinds of suffering, we must get out of the body. That is man's real problem. How to get out of the material body forever. It doesn't matter whether you are Christian, Muslim, or Hindu. Knowledge is knowledge. Wherever knowledge is available, you must pick it up. And this is knowledge. Every living being is imprisoned within a material body. This knowledge applies equally to Hindus, Muslims, Christians, everyone. The soul is imprisoned within the body and must therefore undergo birth, death, disease, and old age. But we all want to live eternally, with full knowledge and full blissfulness. To attain this goal, we must get out of this body. That is the process. It is a mistake to think that you are the body and possess a soul. That is not true. You are the soul, and you are covered by a temporary body. The soul is the important thing, not the body. For example, as long as you wear a coat, it is important to you. But if it becomes torn, you throw it away and you purchase another. The living being constantly experiences the same thing. You separate from this present body and accept another body. That is called death. The body which you previously occupied becomes unimportant, and the body you now occupy becomes important. This is the big problem. People give so much importance to a body that within only a few short years will be exchanged for another. We see there are so many forms. Where do these forms come from? The form of the dog, the cat, the tree, the reptile, the insect, and the fish. There may be evolution, but at the same time all the different species are existing. The fish is existing. The man, the tiger, everyone is existing. It is just like the different types of apartments in any city. You may occupy one of them according to your ability to pay the rent. But all apartments are nevertheless existing at the same time. Similarly, the living entity, according to his karma, is given facility to occupy one of these bodily forms. But there is also evolution. From the fish, the next stage is plant life. From plant forms, the living entity may enter an insect body. From the insect body, the next stage may be the bird, then beast, and finally the spirit soul may evolve into a human form of life. And from the human form, if one becomes qualified, he may evolve further. Otherwise, he must again enter the evolutionary cycle. Therefore, this human form of life is an important junction in the evolutionary development of the living entity.
As the embodied soul continually passes in this body, from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The self-realized soul is not bewildered by such a change. Krishna consciousness is not a question of belief. It is in fact an ancient science. The first step is to know the difference between a living body and a dead one. But what is the difference? The difference is that when somebody dies, the spirit soul or living force leaves the body, and therefore the body is called dead. So there are two things. One, this body, and the other, the living force within the body. We speak of the living force within the body. That is the difference between the science of Krishna consciousness, which is spiritual, and ordinary material science. As such, in the beginning, it is very, very difficult for an ordinary man to appreciate our movement. One must first understand that he is a soul, or something other than his body. As a child grows, he becomes a boy. The boy becomes a young man, and the young man becomes an adult, and the adult becomes an old man. Throughout all this time, although his body is changing from a child to an old man, he still feels himself to be the same person with the same identity. Just see, the body is changing, but the occupier of the body, the soul, remains the same. So, we should logically conclude that when our present body dies, we get another body. This is called the transmigration of the soul,
or reincarnation. For the soul, there is never birth nor death, nor having once been does he ever cease to be. He is unborn, eternal, ever-existing, undying, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. If he qualifies himself in this life to go back to home, back to Godhead, then he can go. If he does not qualify himself, then he gets another material body, and there are 8,400,000 different bodily forms. According to his desires and karma, the laws of nature give him a suitable body. During this life you associate with various modes of material nature, and that association will decide what kind of body you're going to get in the next life. That is strictly under the laws of nature. Everyone is controlled by the laws of nature. They're completely dependent. But out of ignorance, people think that they are free. But they're not free. They are imagining that they're free, but they are completely under these laws of nature. So your next birth will be decided according to your activities, sinful or pious, as the case may be. You are a spiritual being, but because you are materially conditioned, you are under the laws of material nature. So you may believe in the Christian religion, and I may believe in the Hindu religion, but that does not mean that you are going to become an old man, and I am not. We're talking about the science of growing old. This is nature's law. It is not because you are a Christian that you are becoming old, or that because I am a Hindu I am not growing old. Everyone is becoming old. So similarly, all the laws of nature are applicable to everyone. Whether you believe this religion or that religion, it doesn't matter. The spirit soul is invisible to our material eyes. It is atomic in size. After the destruction of the gross body, which is made up of the senses, blood, bone, fat, and so forth, the subtle body of mind, intelligence, and ego goes on working. So at the time of death, this subtle body carries the small spirit soul to another gross body. The process is just like carrying a fragrance. Nobody can see where this rose fragrance is coming from, but we know that it is being carried by the air. You cannot see how, but it is being done. Similarly, the process of transmigration of the soul is very subtle. According to the condition of the mind at the time of death, the minute soul enters into the womb of a particular mother through the semen of a father, and then the soul develops a particular type of body given by the mother. It certainly may be a human being, but it also may be a cat, a dog, or indeed anything. God is saying, anyone who understands me is free from birth and death. But one cannot understand God by materialistic speculation. This is not possible. One must first come to the spiritual platform. Then he gets the intelligence required to understand God. And when he understands God, he does not get any more material bodies. He goes back home, back to Godhead. He lives eternally. No more change of body. Chanting Hare Krishna is the easiest process to become purified in this age, when people are so dull that they cannot very easily understand spiritual knowledge. If one chants the Hare Krishna mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, then his brain becomes purified, and he can understand subtle spiritual matters. Everyone is simply washing the coat and shirt of the body, but forgetting about the soul within. They have no information about what is within the coat and shirt of the body. Ask anybody what he is, and he will say, "Well, yes, I'm an Englishman," or "Perhaps I am Indian." And if we say, I can see you have an English or Indian body, but what are you? Now that we cannot say. The entire modern civilization is operating on the misunderstanding that the body is the self. This is the mentality of cats and dogs. Suppose I try to enter England, and you stop me at the border. Well, I'm an Englishman, you say, but you are Indian. Why have you come here? And the dog barks. Why are you coming here? What is the difference in mentality? The dog is thinking he's a dog and I'm a stranger, and you are thinking you're an Englishman and I am an Indian. There is no difference in this mentality. So if you keep people in the darkness of a dog's mentality and declare that you are advancing in civilization, you are most misguided. Suppose you have a car. So naturally you take care of the car as well as you do yourself. But you don't identify yourself as the car. You don't say, I am this car. That is nonsense. But this is what people are doing. They are taking too much care of the bodily car, thinking that the car is the self. They forget that they are indeed different from the car, that they are a spirit soul and have a different business. Just as no one can drink petrol and be satisfied, so no one can be satisfied within bodily activities. He must find out the proper food for the soul. If a man thinks, I am a car, I must drink this petrol, he is considered insane. Similarly, one who thinks that he is this body, and who tries to become happy with bodily pleasures, is also insane. Our religion is a science. When we say that a child grows into a boy, it is science. It is not religion. Every child grows into a boy. What is the question of religion here? Every man dies. What is the question of religion? And when a man dies, the body becomes useless. What is the question of religion? It is science. Whether you're a Christian, Hindu, or Muslim, when you die, your body becomes useless. This is science. When your relative dies, you cannot say, we are Christian. We believe that he is not dead. No, he has died. Whether you are Christian, Hindu, or Muslim, he has died. So when we speak on this basis, that the body is important only so long as the soul is within the body. When the soul is not there, it is useless. This science is applicable to everyone, and we are trying to educate people on this basis. Everyone, at some time in life, wonders what happens after death. Throughout history, some of the most thoughtful minds have advocated that life does not end with the death of our body, but continues on via a process known as reincarnation. In the Western world, followers of the Orphic religion in ancient Greece were the first known exponents of reincarnation. They were succeeded by Pythagoras, Socrates, Plato, and a host of other philosophers. The Vedic literature of India advocates that the soul, or Atma, gives life to the body. Life does not arise from a particular combination of material elements, as some modern scientists theorize. At the time of death, we leave one body and enter a new one. That is called reincarnation. The concept is not as alien as it might seem. We can observe that we change from one body to another throughout our lives. Our body at birth is completely different from our adult body. Yet throughout these changes, the conscious self remains the same. Similarly, the conscious self remains the same at death and transfers from one body to the next in a cycle of reincarnation. Our present body is the result of a long series of actions and reactions in previous lives. The law that governs this is known as karma. Every action has a reaction. Our previous actions have produced our present body, and our current actions will determine our next body. Only in the human form of life can we free ourselves from the endless cycle of reincarnation, of birth and death, and by re-establishing our eternal loving relationship with Lord Krishna. As Krishna states in the Bhagavad Gita, from the highest planet within the material world to the lowest, all are places of misery, wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains my abode never takes birth again.
His Divine Grace Abhicharanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada was an Indian Gaudiya Vaishnava guru who founded ISKCON, known as the Hare Krishna movement. Many view Bhaktivedanta Swami as a direct representative and messenger of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Born in Calcutta, he was educated at the Scottish Church College. While working at a small pharmaceutical business, he became a follower of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. In 1959, after his retirement, he left his family to become a sannyasi and began writing commentaries on Vaishnava scriptures. As a traveling monk, he became an influential communicator of Gaudiya Vaishnavite theory across India and the Western world through his leadership of ISKCON, founded in 1966. He was very well regarded by most American religious scholars. Here he speaks on the sublime nature of transmigration of the soul, or reincarnation.
So, past, present, future, you exist, the body changes. Is it not clear?
That's clear.
Yeah. So therefore, the conclusion that when he'll not have this body, he'll have another body. You are sitting here. If you don't sit here, you go. That does not mean you are sitting, opportunity is lost. You are sitting here, you sit somewhere. Similarly, the change of body is going on. Therefore, the conclusion is that after you give up this body, you'll have another body, as you have already done. What is the difficulty to understand?
The seeming difficulty is that while the body is different from that of a boy.
Different body must be different, therefore that is called change of body. Unless it is a different body, where is the change?
The memory is there, the boy, and or the spirit is there.
The memory, sometimes we may not remember, just like this child, he may not have memory when he was very small, but you have got memory. You know, when he was a small child, you are doing something, or he was playing with some cats and dogs, but he does not remember that. But you remember it. So, simply because he has forgotten, does that mean that the incidences were not present? So this argument is not very strong because I cannot remember. You do not remember so many things. Huh? But the fact is this, that you are changing. from this body to this body to this body. Therefore the conclusion should be, after this body I will accept another body. And that's the fact. As you have accepted in this life from one body to another body, there is a process how to accept it. Similarly, under the same process, you accept another body when this body is no longer useful. Just like at night, you give up this body, you take your subtle body and you go to somewhere. You are sleeping in your room, but you are working in a different place. Don't you do that? Mm-hmm. So, because this body is still useful, therefore you come to back again this body, and in the morning you wake up with this body. So death means when this body is useless, you do not come to this body, you accept another body. This is called death. That subtle body takes you from this body to the womb of another mother by nature's direction, that this soul shall get this kind of body. So the soul is entered in the womb of another mother's body, and then the body is prepared by the mother's blood and flesh, and when the body is sufficiently capable of working itself, then it comes again and begins its work. This is birth and death. The soul is eternal. Therefore, a sober man should think, why should I change my body? Why this trouble I shall take? That is human sense. If I am eternal, why not my eternal body? Eternal existence, why shall I die? This is human sense. Unless one comes to this understanding, he is animal. Because animal, by nature's law, is going on. He does not know. Then a human form of body, when he understands that I'll have to change this body, I'll have to get another body, then the question is, what kind of body I shall get? That is human intelligence. By nature's way, we are getting body, but that is on the selection of the nature according to my work. If I work like animal, I get animal body. If I work as demigod, I get demigod body. If I act as trees, then you get tree body. If you acted like dog, you get dog's body. Nature's way. Therefore you find so many varieties of body.
Reincarnation and the Bhagavad Gita. Ahimsa, non-violence, means not arresting the progressive life of any living entity. One should not think that since the spiritual spark is never killed even after killing of the body, there is no harm in killing animals for sense gratification. People are now addicted to eating animals, in spite of having an ample supply of grains, fruits, and milk. There is no necessity for animal killing. The animals are also making progress in their evolutionary life by transmigrating from one category of animal life to another. If an animal is staying in a particular body for so many days and years, but is ultimately killed, then he has to come back again in that form to complete the remaining days in order to be promoted to another species of life. So their progress should not be checked simply to satisfy one's palate. As a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. For those who have taken birth, death is certain, and after death, one is sure to take birth again. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail in his next life. The living entity thus taking another gross body obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. Further, the path of reincarnation does not always lead uphill. The human is not guaranteed a human birth in his next life. For example, if one dies with the mentality of a dog, then in his next life he will receive the eyes, ears, nose, etc. of a dog, thus allowing him to enjoy canine pleasures. Lord Sri Krishna confirms the fate of such unfortunate souls, saying, "When one dies in the mode of ignorance, he takes birth in the animal kingdom." Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. That which pervades the body is indestructible. No one is able to destroy the imperishable soul. As the sun illumines the universe, so does the living entity within the body illuminate the entire body by consciousness. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the three modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see this. The endeavoring transcendentalists, situated in self-realization, can see all of this clearly. But those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try. For the soul, there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever-existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. Reincarnation and the Srimad Bhagavatam. The law of nature is so subtle that every part of our body is influenced by the respective stars, and a living being obtains his working body to fulfill the terms of imprisonment, and by manipulation of such astronomical influences. A man's destiny is therefore ascertained by the birth-time constellation of stars, and a factual horoscope is made by a learned astrologer. It is a great science, and misuse of a science does not make it useless.
from time immemorial. The living entity travels in the different species of life and the different planes, almost perpetually. This process is explained in the Bhagavad Gita. Under the spell of Maya, everyone is wandering throughout the universe on the carriage of the body offered by the material energy. Materialistic life involves a series of actions and reactions. It is a long film spool of actions and reactions, and one lifespan is just a flash in such a reactionary show. When a child is born, it is understood that his particular type of body is the beginning of another set of activities, and when an old man dies, it is to be understood that one set of reactionary activities is finished. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:31-44. The living entity creates his own body by his personal desires, and the external energy of the Lord supplies him with exact forms by which he can enjoy his desires to the fullest extent. The tiger wants to enjoy the blood of another animal. Therefore, by the grace of the Lord, the material energy supplies him with the body of a tiger, with facilities for enjoying just that blood from another animal. Srimad Bhagavatam 2:9-2. After death, one forgets everything about the present bodily relationships. We have a little experience of this at night when we go to sleep. While sleeping, we forget everything about this body and bodily relations. Although this forgetfulness is a temporary situation which lasts only a few hours. Death is nothing but sleeping for a few months in order to develop another term of bodily engagement, which we are awarded by the law of nature according to our own aspirations. Therefore, one has only to change the aspiration during the course of this present body, and for this there is need of training in the current duration of life. This training can be begun at any stage, or even a few seconds before death. But the usual procedure is for one to get this training from very early life. Srimad Bhagavatam 2:1-15. Originally, the living entity is a spiritual being, but when he desires to enjoy this material world, he comes down. We can understand that the living entity first accepts a body that is human in form, but gradually, due to his degraded activities, he falls into lower forms of life, into the animal, plant, and aquatic forms. By the gradual process of evolution, the living entity attains the body of a human being and is given another chance to get out of the process of transmigration. If he again misuses his chance in the human form to understand his position, he is again placed into the cycle of repeated birth and death in various types of bodies. Srimad Bhagavatam 4:2-9-4. This science of transmigration is completely unknown to modern scientists. So-called scientists do not like to bother with these things, because if they would at all consider this subtle subject matter and the problems of life, they would see that their own future is very dark. Srimad Bhagavatam 4:28-1. Modern civilization is based on family comforts, the highest standard of amenities. After retirement, everyone expects to live a very comfortable life in a well-furnished home, decorated with fine ladies and children, without any desire to get out of such a comfortable home. High government officers and ministers stick to their prize posts until death, and they neither dream nor desire to get out of such homely comforts. Bound by such hallucinations, materialistic men prepare various plans for a still more comfortable life. But suddenly, cruel death comes without mercy and takes away the great plan-maker against his desire, forcing him to give up his present body for another. Such a plan-maker is forced then to accept another body in one of the 8,400,000 species of life, according to the fruits of the work which he has performed. In the next life, persons who were too much attached to family comforts are generally awarded lower species of life on account of sinful acts performed during a long duration of a sinful life, and thus all of the energy of the human life is spoiled. In order to be saved from the danger of spoiling the rare human form of life and being attached to unreal things, one must take the warning of death at the age of 50, if not earlier. The principle is that one should take it for granted that the death warning is already there, even prior to the attainment of 50 years of age, and thus, at any stage of life, one should prepare himself for a better next life. Srimad Bhagavatam 2:1-16. A man gets his next life's birth according to what he thinks of at the time of death. If someone is too attached to his wife, naturally he thinks of his wife at the time of death, and in the next life he takes the body of a woman. Similarly, if a woman thinks of her husband at the time of death, naturally she gets the body of a man in her next life. We should always remember, as it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, that both the gross and subtle material bodies are dresses. They are the shirts and coat of the living entity. To be either a woman or a man involves only one's bodily dress. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:31-41. In dreams, we sometimes see things that we have never experienced in the present body. Sometimes in dreams we think that we are flying in the sky, although we have no experience of such flying. This means that once in a previous life, either as a demigod or astronaut, we did fly in the sky. The impression is there in the stockpile of the mind, and it suddenly expresses itself. It is like fermentation taking place in the depths of water, which sometimes manifests itself in bubbles on the water's surface. Sometimes we dream of coming to a place we have never known or experienced in this lifetime, but this is proof that in a past life we experienced this. The impression is kept within the mind and sometimes becomes manifest either in dream or in thought. The conclusion is that the mind is a storehouse of various thoughts and experiences undergone during our past lives. Thus, there is a chain of continuation from one life to another, from previous lives to this life, and from this life to future lives. Srimad Bhagavatam 4:29-64. At the time of death, every living entity worries about what will happen to his wife and children. Similarly, a politician also worries about what will happen to his country or political party. One's next life will also be affected by the acts one performs in this life. Sometimes, politicians act most sinfully for their own sense gratification. It is not unusual for a politician to kill the opposing party. Even though a politician may be allowed to take birth in his so-called homeland, he still has to undergo suffering due to his sinful activities from his previous life. Srimad Bhagavatam 4:28-21. Ghosts are bereft of a physical body because of their grievously sinful acts, such as suicide. The last resort of ghostly characters in human society is to take shelter of suicide, either material or spiritual. Material suicide causes the loss of a physical body, and spiritual suicide causes the loss of the individual identity. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:14-24. Karma. Ever wondered why bad things happen to good people? Why we suffer? Why some days are awesome and others morose? If God exists, why does He keep quiet about it? The answer to all of these questions is karma. Karma is one of those topics many people know about, but few understand. In literal terms, karma means activity, and the law of karma regulates the reactions to our activities. If we act in good faith or pious ways, we reap good reactions. If we are impious, sinful, or destructive, we reap bad reactions in the future. Christian theology explains, "As ye sow, so shall ye reap." While in physics, karma is expressed by Newton's law. For every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Karmic reactions include not only things which happen to us, but determine our health, wealth, intelligence, physical appearance, and social status, as well as our personalities and inclinations. While we have some degree of freedom to choose our current actions, our choices are influenced by our natures or personalities, which have developed from our previous actions. Karma thus locks us up in a cycle of action and subsequent reaction. As long as we are in this cycle, we will experience both happiness and distress. Even if we act in a pious way, we destine ourselves to accept another material body at death to enjoy the reactions of our materially good actions. As long as we accept a material body, we cannot avoid the miseries of disease, old age, and death. Fortunately, karma is temporary. We can break free from its bonds by performing spiritual acts in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such acts of devotion, or bhakti yoga, purify the soul and gradually awaken our spiritual knowledge and innate love for Krishna. Thus, both of our karma and our long-standing desire to enjoy life within the illusory material world, the root of our bondage,
are destroyed. What are samskars? To understand one of the primary mechanisms of how reincarnation works, it is necessary to understand the effect of samskars on the living entity's long evolutionary trek. According to various schools of philosophy, samskars are the subtle mental impressions left by all thoughts, intentions, and actions that an individual has ever experienced. Often likened to grooves in the mind, they can be considered psychological or emotional imprints that contribute to the formation of behavioral patterns. Samskars are below the level of normal consciousness and are said to be the root of all impulses, character traits, and innate dispositions. Samskars originate when the vritti, or thought wave, arises in the mind. Once this thought wave has left the conscious mind, it sinks down into the subconscious or unconscious mind, where it remains in the form of a samskar. As such, samskars also serve as memory stores that hold all past experiences in perfect detail. When memories are recalled, samskars come back to the level of the conscious mind in waves and recollections. Each time a samskar is recalled and repeated, the groove gets deeper and the impression gets stronger, ultimately leading to the formation of habit. In addition to providing a record of the past, samskars have a residual potency that can potentially influence a person's future. They contain hidden expectations and unconscious ideas that are waiting to come to fruition, and in some cases, these can be strong enough to alter thought. Yogic practices such as dharana and dhyana are believed to enable practitioners to encounter samskars below the threshold of consciousness, thereby allowing negative imprints to be understood and replaced with positive ones. According to Vedic beliefs of reincarnation, every person is already born with samskars which are imprinted and embedded in their minds from past lives. During an individual's lifetime, they will gain many more samskars based upon their intentions, thoughts, and actions. As such, samskars are associated with the theory of karma. The actions accumulated in one's lifetime will be passed on to future reincarnations via samskars. Samskars shape the moral and spiritual development of an individual, and are considered to be the root of both pleasurable and painful interpretations of experience. Since samskars can color perceptions of self and others in either a positive or negative way, the aim of spiritual practice should be to seek out and strengthen certain samskars while eliminating those which do not align with moral and ethical values. We can understand more by hearing first from Meher Baba, and then one of his chief disciples, Bal Kachuri. The evolution of the limited individual is completely determined by the samskars accumulated by him throughout the ages. And though it is all part of imagination, the determinism is thorough and automatic. Every action and experience, howsoever imperial, leaves behind it an impression in the mental body. This impression is an objective modification of the mental body, and as the mental body remains the same, the impressions accumulated by an individual are capable of persisting throughout several lives. When the samskars thus accumulated begin to express themselves, instead of merely lying latent in the mental body, they are experienced as desire. That is, they are apprehended as being subjective. The objective and the subjective are the two aspects of samskars. The former is a passive state of latency, and the latter is an active state
of manifestation. Through the active phase, the accumulated samskars determine each experience and action of the limited self. Just as several feet of film have to pass in a cinema to show a brief action on the screen, many samskars are often involved in determining a single action of the limited self. Through such expression and fulfillment in experience, the samskars get spent up. The weak samskars are spent up mentally, the strong ones spent up subtly in the form of desires and imaginative experience. And those samskars that are powerful are spent up physically by expressing themselves through bodily action. Though this speeding up of samskars is going on continually, it does not end in freedom from samskars, because new samskars are inevitably being created, not only through fresh actions, but even through the very process of spending them up. So the load of samskars goes on increasing, and the individual finds himself helpless before the problem of throwing off the burden. The samskars deposited by specific actions and experiences render the mind susceptible to similar actions and experiences. But after a certain point is reached, this tendency is checked and counteracted by a natural reaction consisting in a complete changeover to its direct opposite, making room for the operation of opposite samskars. Very often the two opposites form parts of one and the same chain of imagination. For example, a person might first experience that he is a famous writer with wealth, fame, family, and all the agreeable things in life. And later, in that same incarnation, might experience that he has now lost his wealth, fame, friends, family, and all the agreeable things he cherished so dearly. Sometimes it seems that a chain of imagination does not contain both the opposites in the same lifetime. For instance, a man might experience throughout his life that he is a powerful king, always victorious in battle. In this case, he has to balance this experience by the experience of defeats or the like in the next life, taking one more life to complete his chain of imagination. The purely psychological compulsion of the samskars is thus subject to the deeper need of the soul to know itself. The Winding and Unwinding of Samskars by Bal Kachuri. The winding process of samskars starts at the beginning of each one's entry into creation as stone, and this winding process is necessary for the evolution of the individual's consciousness. This winding process remains natural from the stone through the animal kingdoms. This process becomes unnatural at the human level of consciousness, because human beings do so many things which are not required for the progress of their individual consciousness. Consciousness is fully evolved in the human form, and there is nothing required for furthering the evolution of the individual. Now what happens is that human consciousness of every living individual becomes stuck because of the unnatural winding of samskars. This happens because every individual mind is loaded with the impressions of previous lives, and while in different human forms, and while spending those samskars, mind becomes involved in many things that have nothing to do with the progress of his consciousness toward the goal. In this way, the once natural winding and unwinding of samskars becomes unnatural, and so it becomes extremely difficult to be free from the binding of unnatural winding, because these unnatural samskars do not unwind. To keep the body healthy, food is necessary, and if anyone eats food necessary for the body's health, the samskars produced by the act of eating are natural. However, if anyone commits suicide or murders or does some sexual perversion, the samskars produced by such acts are unnatural. These unnatural samskars lie in the mind like knots. These knots are unnatural impressions of unnatural actions, and the binding of such impressions are very firm. These knots are tight inside of the individual's mind. The knot of unnatural impressions becomes so firm and tight that unwinding simply becomes impossible. For example, if one commits suicide, one is stuck in the astral form for centuries, and if one commits murder, one is stuck in the hell state for a long, long time. Samskars must be spent. In human consciousness, if the individual's samskars are spent in a natural way, then the process of spending is short. Therefore, this individual can fulfill what is required to prepare for his involution. But when the samskars are spent in unnatural ways, then the process of spending becomes long and complicated, and it becomes virtually impossible to untie the knots of unnatural binding. The avatar works to keep the winding and unwinding process in a natural state. If this help was not rendered by the avatar to humanity, it would be virtually impossible for human beings to unwind their gross samskars and thereby enter the planes of involution. Thus, during the avatar's manifestation, human consciousness in the winding and unwinding of samskars is brought back into a natural state. Such work is unimaginable because the avatar has to achieve this natural state in every individual human mind. For the furtherance of the individual's own evolution or involution, natural samskars are essential for one's progress. Natural samskars are those impressions which are absolutely essential for the consciousness to evolve and involve. For example, one must learn to live, so one must earn a livelihood. But one does not have to cheat or steal or murder to live. It is not during the process of evolution that one takes on unnatural samskars. It is in human form. Human beings collect those samskars not necessary for the progress of their consciousness. Such samskars are called unnatural because they have nothing to do with the real purpose of creation. As a further example, suppose one decides to go on a pilgrimage to India. The way there is by plane, but if one decides not to take this trip straight through and decides instead to sightsee in London or Paris, he will not be able to reach India for some time. Because of sightseeing, he gets more involved in these cities than involved in the purpose of his trip. If he gets entangled in the cities, he could even forget his intended purpose, which was a spiritual pilgrimage to India. The samskars collected while sightseeing represent unnatural samskars, because these samskars were not required to reach his goal, India. These samskars have nothing to do with India, which represents his destination. In human form, such things as this happen again and again, and it is because of these unnatural samskars that the journey towards God becomes very, very long. And because of the complications that the unnatural samskars produce, it becomes always more and more difficult for one to reach the divine destination. The path of God is straight like a rod. One has to travel straight from one end of the rod to the other end. If one has natural samskars, he follows the force which propels him on his journey, so he reaches the other end soon. But if one has unnatural samskars, he cannot help but zigzag his way, and he inevitably remains stuck in the same place. These unnatural samskars are like a rope that wraps itself tighter and tighter around the same spot, and one cannot continue his progress along the length of the rod. The natural samskars are also like a rope, but they wrap progressively around and around the rod, reaching further and further towards the end. In the gross world, physical actions are necessary. In the subtle and mental worlds, subtle and mental actions are also necessary. Physical actions produce gross impressions, and if the physical actions are not natural, but are unnatural, then one gets very firmly bound in the gross world. One is stuck in the gross world, and it becomes virtually impossible for that person to progress towards the subtle and mental worlds. When the avatar comes, it is in order to wipe out these unnatural impressions, and he wipes out these impressions by severing them. Since these unnatural impressions have been produced by physical actions, the avatar also has to perform physical actions to annihilate them. Annihilation of unnatural samskars is his physical work in the gross world, and it is only when these unnatural knots of human consciousness are severed that we see that he has come with a sword. For his work in the subtle and mental planes, the avatar does not have to exert. It is only for the gross world that he must exert, and when he exerts, he appears to suffer in order to cut through the unnaturalness in human consciousness. But when his sword severs, it severs directly through the root. The avatar cuts through all unnaturalness in the world, and gradually makes a path that becomes clear and natural for mankind to follow. These unnatural samskars are called the sins of the world because they are obstructions to the path of truth. The natural samskars are called the seeds of destiny because they are what is necessary and essential. The natural samskars are called the seeds of destiny because they are what is necessary and essential for making the journey towards God. These unnatural samskars are obstructions in human consciousness in approaching the path of truth, and because of them, little progress in consciousness is ever made until the sword of truth has severed their knots. Part 3. The Life and Death of Ajamil. The Afterlife. There once was a young Brahmin called Ajamil. Ajamil was compassionate and kind to all. He lived with his parents and young wife, and always chanted his prayers and mantras, as well as offering his respects to his parents and the spiritual master. One day, when Ajamil went to the forest to collect fruit and flowers for deity worship, he came across a drunk man who was shamelessly kissing a prostitute. Ajamil became attracted to this woman, but knew that it was not appropriate. Despite his attempts to control his restless mind, he could not get rid of the thoughts of her. Eventually, impelled by desire, he moved in with her and fell from his pure lifestyle into degraded habits. He became a cheat, a thief, a gambler, and his heart turned cruel and cold. Now this prostitute bore Ajamil 10 sons. The youngest of them was called Narayan. Ajamil was so attached to his son Narayan that he thought of nothing else. He could not even eat nor drink before he had fed Narayan. Many years rolled on. Ajamil was getting old, and at the advanced age of 88 was still unmindful that death was inevitably drawing near. One night, half asleep, he saw approaching him 3 dreadful and ferocious beings, holding ropes and chains in their hands. They had twisted faces, long unruly hair on their heads, and their bodily hair was like bristles. Ajamil recognized them as the legendary Yamadutas, the servant of Yamaraj, the Lord of Death. They had come to take him to the planet of the Emperor of Death. Overwhelmed by terror, he cried out to his son, "Narayan, come here, Narayan!" Because Ajamil chanted the holy name of Narayan, and even though he was really calling his son, the beautiful Vishnu Dutas, servants of Lord Vishnu, immediately arrived. They each looked just like Lord Vishnu. Their complexion was dark blue. They had 4 arms, and on their heads they wore beautiful golden crowns. They were exquisitely beautiful and moved gracefully. They immediately approached the Yamadutas, who were dragging the Brahmin's soul from his body, and ordered, "We forbid you. You cannot take him to Yamaraj." The fierce-looking Yamadutas angrily retorted, "Who are you to prevent us from taking this sinful man to our master Lord Yama? Our master Yamaraj punishes those who lead a sinful life. Remember that Ajamil left his parents and young wife and lived with a prostitute, and therefore deserves to be punished." The Vishnu Dutas replied to the Yamadutas, "No doubt he was a sinner. But since he chanted the Lord's powerful name, even though indicating his son, he comes under Narayan's protection. All of his sins have been eradicated, and therefore he is exempt from any punishment by Yama." After some further discussion, the Yamadutas reluctantly released Ajamil and returned to their master, Yamaraj. After they explained the embarrassing incident, Yama ordered them, "You should never go near the devotees, for they remember and chant the Lord's name constantly. Bring to me only those people who have never chanted the Lord's name, and whose ears have never once heard the stories of the Lord." After hearing the conversation between the Vishnu Dutas and the Yamadutas, Ajamil realized that he had been given a second chance. Fully aware of his previous folly, he became a great devotee of Narayan, and strictly performed his spiritual duties to free himself from any traces of material desire. A few years later, the Vishnu Dutas returned on a swan aeroplane and escorted Ajamil back to the spiritual realm, back to home, back to Godhead.
God is a person. Even though God is widely recognized as the greatest person, his form and personality are not widely known. Even many theists think that, in the ultimate issue, God is formless. Pictures of Lord Krishna playing a flute are commonly dismissed as quaint, mythological representations of the ineffable, faceless, divine. However, there is overwhelming evidence suggesting that the Supreme Person is not abstract at all. In the Vedas, the oldest and most comprehensive of all world scriptures, one can discover that the Absolute Truth has both impersonal and personal aspects. His eternal, blissful, all-knowing and all-attractive personality tend to remain hidden behind his all-pervasive majesty and overwhelming greatness. Since everything in our experiences has form and quality, it makes sense that the source of all sources should also, and to an infinite degree. As drops of ocean have the ocean's qualities in minute degree, our forms and personalities are infinitesimal samples of the infinite, supreme person. Suicide.
One of the most tragic things today is to hear of people, especially young people, in school or college, committing suicide because of a sense of failure. This is because they have no conviction of a God of love, or of an orderly universe, or of the endless chances which they will have to make good and achieve their aspirations. Only the Christian Church has failed to teach the truth of reincarnation. And the pity is that the doctrine was taught in the Christian Church until the Fifth Ecumenical Council was held in Constantinople in 543 AD. Now this was done in spite of many passages in the Bible referring to reincarnation. This ban left Christians to face an unjust and unloving God who gave only one chance, and sometimes, if we died in infancy, not even that. Yet he created redwoods to live 5,000 years. And what is sillier than saying God is love, but that he would still plunge us into hell and keep us there eternally if we are not good here? As far as God is concerned, evil is only, as the song goes, a sometime thing. During our long journey, we have learned to discard it. There really is no death. All we do is drop or discard one body for another. But the worst possible thing we can ever do is to commit suicide. This is done by people who have the false idea they are getting away from their problems in this way. They may be ill with cancer, and so they say, "I don't want to be a burden to my family." But inside, they want to escape the pain and helplessness. Or they are lonely, so they want to rejoin someone who has passed over. They feel they have a right to do what they want with their lives. But nobody owns his life. It belongs to God. There are certain lessons to be learned in each lifetime, and certain samskars to be worked out. When we welch on the job, the toll we have to pay isn't worth it. No problem we have to cope with is as bad as having the problem still facing us and no physical body with which to work it out. When we commit suicide, we can neither go forward nor backward, so we stay earthbound for a long time. We realize what we should have done while we had a body, and we cannot do it without one. We did not finish our appointed tasks, so we cannot go ahead in the astral world. It is much better to face our lot in life as it unfolds. Even if one tries and fails, sooner or later he must succeed. People get discouraged over love, finances, all sorts of temporal things. And yet a brighter life could be awaiting them just 2 months hence. The fact is, we really never have more than we can bear, if we believe in God. Lack of endurance is our weakness. God loves bravery. Life constantly persists and renews itself, and we should not be so attached to our present form. Death is only the interval between two lives. As one of the old church fathers, Origen, AD 185 to 254, wrote, "Every soul has existed from the beginning, and comes into this world strengthened by the victories or weakened by the defeats of its previous life. Its work in this world determines its place in the world which is to follow. At the time of death, the soul drops its physical body. The subtle body, with its astral sheath, soon to be discarded, has its length, commonly known as the silver cord, snapped, and is free to leave its gross form and go to the astral world. The mind remains within the subtle body. Nobody can believe that each soul is newly created when a baby is born, and that God, or whatever power creates, is having fun by producing vicious or idiotic or retarded babies, and that instead of a perfect plan for evolution. God created an irrational chaos without any mercy or justice. But how does this explain infant genius, music, etc., or the Shakespeares or Einsteins of this world? Could a St. Francis of Assisi just happen? Genius is not inherited, nor is moral character, but often physical likeness is. This is because in evolution a soul is directed to take birth in a family where it can acquire the body needed for such roles as a musician or prize fighter, etc., and where it contacts people formerly known. Among abnormal kinds of death, suicide deserves special attention. Suicide may be divided into 4 grades: 1. Lowest, 2. Low, 3. High, and 4. Highest. The lowest type is a last measure in escaping punishment or ignominy, after the individual has tried unscrupulously to satisfy his own selfish desires. Thus, one who has committed murder for lust or power may commit suicide when he is caught. Even after leaving the body, such a person does not succeed in severing his link with the gross world for hundreds of years. These individuals live literally as ghosts in the semi-subtle sphere. They experience agonizing suffering because of their unfulfilled desires. Due to the link which they preserve with the gross world, they continue to desire various gross objects keenly, a desire which can never be fulfilled. A somewhat less acute class of suffering in imagination is experienced in the hell state by suicides who have been slightly better motivated, but who are still classified as low. In this group are those motivated by sheer disgust with life. Thus, a person suffering from bad health or stricken by a loathsome disease, or one who is poverty-stricken. A somewhat less acute class of suffering in imagination is experienced in the hell state by suicides who have been slightly better motivated, but who are still classified as low. In this group are those motivated by sheer disgust with life. Thus, a person suffering from bad health or stricken with a disease, or one who is poverty-stricken and ashamed of being a burden on others, might put an end to his life through a lack of will to live. Since the cause of such a suicide is revulsion from earthly life, the ego mind does not continue to maintain any enduring link with the gross world beyond the normal 3 or 4 days following death. After that, the link is snapped, and the ego mind then begins to experience the intense suffering of its bad samskars, usually termed the hell state. Although a ghost caught in the semi-subtle sphere suffers even more acutely than does the ego mind experiencing the hell state, the latter achieves some exhaustion of evil samskars, while the former does not. Further, the sufferings of the ghosts who maintain their link with earthly life are more tantalizing, because the link constantly holds before them the prospect of fulfillment of gross desires without the actual means for their satisfaction. The general belief that suicide is bad is due to the fact that it is usually the result of low motives or a cowardly attitude towards life. When suicide is employed by an escape from dilemmas brought on by a failure to cope with the needs of life, but far-reaching as well in its demoralizing effects upon the victim. The third, or high type of suicide, is in no way rooted in inferior motives, and is therefore free from their deteriorating effects. It is inspired by altruistic motives alone, and is a sacrifice made to secure the material or spiritual well-being of others. One who meets death through a hunger strike, in order to better the welfare of the masses, is a suicide of this high type. The motives of such a suicide are not far different from those martyrs who lay down their lives on the battlefield for country, society, or religion. The total absence of base motives in this high type of suicide makes it entirely different from the lower grades. As in other noble acts of self-effacement, such highly motivated actions entitle the departed individual to the privileges and pleasures of the heavenly state, and also constitutes a definite asset in his spiritual ongoing. However, a suicide inspired by ordinary altruistic motives is not the highest type. The highest class results from the intense desire to see God or to unite with Him. This is an extremely rare occurrence. In most cases in which suicide is believed to have been committed for the sake of God, there is a mixture of other motivating factors, such as dissatisfactions with conditions in earthly life. If and when suicide is embraced purely for the sake of attaining God, it can have the effect of achieving liberation or mukti. The masters have always warned aspirants against resorting to suicide for the intensity of their longing for union with God. For there too is great room for self-deception and a mixture of inferior conscious motivation. Regardless of the abnormality of the circumstances which may lie back of it, no type of death can really damn the individual forever. It is never more than an incident in his long spiritual journey.
Krishna is a Sanskrit word that means all attractive. The name Krishna conveys the full meaning of God, because God is all attractive. He is full of all opulences. In this world, we're attracted by a person who's very rich, famous, highly educated, beautiful. These are features of attraction, and when all these qualities are reposed in one person without any rival, that person is God. Unless God is all attractive, how can He be God? Krishna has all these opulences in full, and that is the full definition of God. Our process for understanding Krishna and coming closer to Him is to chant His holy names. In chanting God's names, there's no loss, no harm, only great gain. By chanting, we gradually cleanse our heart and realize who and what God is. Actually, the purpose of human life is to know God. The special significance, special privilege of being human is that, unlike the animals, we can understand God. In fact, we are meant to understand God, and therefore, in every human society, there's some sort of religion. Every religion, whether Christianity or Judaism or Hinduism, is meant to understand God. The process may be different, the audience may be different, but the goal is the same, to understand God and come closer to Him. For example, those in the Christian, Muslim, and Jewish religions, as well as we Vaishnavas, all accept that God created this world. The concepts, God is the supreme, God is great, are accepted by everyone. The only difference is that we give details so that modern people who are advanced in education and scientific knowledge can understand. But the primary principle, to understand God, that God is great, we are tiny, we are subordinate to God, we are maintained by God. This idea is present in all religions.
Radhe 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 Bolo, Radhe Govinda Bolo. 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 Radhe 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 Bolo, Radhe Govinda Bolo.
Oh, deep blue Lord of my heart, show me your unmasked face, shining like 1,000 suns in an empty sky. Oh, ragged soul, unleash me from the body, free me from mind, release me from the iron grip of the senses, banish me forever from this weary world. Dear Redeemer, I bow to you by the reedy river, see you in the trees, gather you in the harvest, breathe you in the morning breeze. Soul shaker, shake loose my pride, turn me upside down, drown me in your foaming tide. Lord Shri Krishna, smiling cowherd of Vrindavan, allow me entrance into your abode, but only as a speck of dust along your road, or a feather falling from your proud peacocks, a drop of water in your ocean. Nothing grand may I be, but grand enough to live with thee.
Radhe 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 Bolo, Radhe Govinda Bolo. 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 Radhe 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 Bolo, Radhe Govinda Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. wanna go there. The beauty of the moon has fallen to the ground in the presence of the Lord. In the presence of the Lord. If you're still attached to the material world, it's so hard to see the one who loves you. But if you really want to be happy and free, let us go now to this wonderful Vrindavan, where we chant and dance day and night. Vrindavan, every word is a song. The beauty of the moon has fallen to the ground in the presence of the Lord. In the presence of the Lord. If you're still attached to the material world, it's so hard to see the one who loves you. But if you really want to be happy and free, let us go now to this wonderful abode. Vrindavan, Vrindavan, Vrindavan. Vrindavan, land of no return. 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 Vrindavan, land of no return.
Who is Sripad Jagannath Das? Sripad Jagannath Das was born in Rochester, New York, in the early afternoon of September 11th, 1953. As a child, he experienced many spontaneous spiritual episodes centered around the realization of the reality of God, transmigration, and the soul. Jagannath is a student of the 5,000-year-old non-sectarian devotional yoga path. At 15, he began the serious practice of Bhakti Yoga as taught by His Divine Grace, E.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the foremost exponent of the science of self-realization in the modern world. 3 years later, he traveled to London to personally study with his master after having spent time as a brahmachari, or celibate student, in a Tampa, Florida ashram under Pushta Krishna Swami. At 21, Jagannath traveled alone to India, living in the beautiful village of Mala, just outside Rishikesh, and also in Vrindavan, Uttar Pradesh. Following 3 years of intensive study and meditation, he made his way back to the United States. There, under his secular name of Jeffrey Giuliano, he became the internationally best-selling author of over 32 books and 1,000 audiobooks, all on the subject of spirituality, yoga philosophy, popular music, and culture. When he was 30, he took formal initiation from His Grace Swami B.H. Mangal Maharaj in Toronto, along with his wife Vrindarani Devi. Together they established a large country ashram, Krishna temple, food bank, recording complex, and animal sanctuary in Lockport, New York. At the age of 40, however, Das began to slowly wind down his various business activities in order to fulfill the prophecy of his time in India and the wish of his spiritual masters that he help spread the inspirational tenets of bhakti in the Gaudiya Vaishnav tradition everywhere. Jagannath then moved to Bangkok, where he became a popular film actor, and in 2017 established an audiobook company, Icon Audio Arts, which he runs today with his young son, Eden Garrett Giuliano. They split their time between Thailand and India.
We hope you've enjoyed this Inner Lion Media presentation. Inner Lion Media. Thank you for listening.